From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Whether the road is lined with yellow bricks.
He was an odd father for the 1800s. I think he was an odd person in general.
Or cars.
We want to show the non-car people why cars are so interesting, the impact they've had on history.
Along with clocks.
I mean, we call them clocks, but as you can see, they're a lot more than that.
And a bit of nostalgia.
You know, people, say it's going to die out, but I've not seen any indication of that.
You can find it all as we tour the American countryside this morning on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths, and happy Independence Day. On this day, we know many people are celebrating by traveling. This morning, we want to hit the road with you by checking out the American countryside with Farm Journal's Andrew McCrae. And we kick it off with a story about a little town that draws tourists from around the world, thanks to a bit of TV fiction.
Mike Cockrum lives in a town that is often known by a different name.
The connection is, Andy's born and raised here, and so you get a lot of Mayberry fans come looking for Mayberry.
Mike is speaking of Andy Griffith, who grew up in Mount Airy, North Carolina, but many people just refer to it as Mayberry, since that's the place Andy lived on the long-running TV show. But for a couple of decades at least, there really wasn't much of Mayberry that you could find in Mount Airy, save some common street and place names. When more tourists began coming here in the late 90s and early 2000s, Mike had an idea.
I'm an old car nut, been restoring, fixing up cars since I was a teenager. And so I said, hey, I'm gonna get me one of them old Ford Galaxies like you used on the show and fix it up like a squad car and ride people around town in it.
The Mayberry squad car tours were born. Mike has restored several old Ford Galaxies now, making them appear just like the one Andy and Barney used to patrol Mayberry.
We started at Wally's filling station here. That's our home office, and we leave here and we go out to our granite quarry. It's about a mile out of town. Mount Airy is known as the Granite City. That's our official nickname.
And Mike and his drivers are known to let the siren wail as they make the run through Mount Airy streets. A tour that takes you past places like the Snappy Lunch and other iconic stores from the show. You go by Andy's old school, where he first began to sing and perform, a place that today brings many visitors to snap a picture with Andy and Opie. But back at Mike's headquarters is a real gem, a place that appears straight from your TV set.
It's a recreation of the courthouse. It's pretty close. It's just a recreation. It's free, and people come in and take pictures.
The inside of the building is a perfect replica of Andy's sheriff's office, complete with the jail cells that held folks like Otis. Plus, he's recreated many other buildings and scenes often seen on the show. It's a place where people enjoy spending time, remembering the storylines, and laughing about some of their favorite episodes. Although it's been decades since the show was produced, the people just keep coming.
People, say it's going to die out, but I've not seen any indication of that. In fact, we see a lot of young folks that's into the show.
It's been over 50 years since the show was on television, but yet the message is timeless. A sheriff in a friendly town teaching us the lessons of life yet today. Traveling the countryside in Mayberry, Mount Airy, North Carolina. I'm Andrew McCrae.
It's often referred to as America's national pastime, and with baseball in full swing, the sport actually played a vital role in shaping this nation. And for one iconic baseball spot, it has some very strong farming roots. For this story, Andrew takes us to Cooperstown, New York.
When people hear of Cooperstown, New York, they often think of baseball. They aren't wrong, but there's an important part of the story about this town on Lake Otsego that we should cover first.
So in 1786 we were founded, and throughout the 19th century, the 1800s, we were really kind of a tourism mecca for what someone who is considered one of the early novelists in America, James Fenimore Cooper.
Ellen Telepaw is the mayor of Cooperstown. The town was named for Judge William Cooper, the founder of the village and father of the famous novelist who wrote works like The Last of the Mohicans. But today, many know the town for the supposed invention of baseball by Abner Doubleday on an open parcel of land here.
They called it Finney's cow pasture, and it basically was the back lots of many of the houses that surround it. At the turn of the century, early 1900s, there was a desire to create a field here.
Eventually, an actual baseball field, founded in the early 1920s, named Doubleday Field, was built on the site of Finney's cow pasture, a site once thought to be the birthplace of the game. The historic field gets plenty of use yet today.
We rent the field 3 times a day from April till Columbus Day in October.
While baseball was played here from an early date, it was most likely not the place the game was founded. The folks in Cooperstown don't dispute that fact, but these days it doesn't really matter.
Whether we're the true home of baseball, we certainly weren't the place it was founded, but we are America's home for a baseball.
The Baseball Hall of Fame was founded here in 1936 and draws thousands each year. It's a pilgrimage spot for most baseball fans and a goal for most major league players to be enshrined here. People travel here year-round, and a huge crowd descends on the town for each new class of Hall of Famers inducted. It all takes place in a very small town.
We're less than 1,800. We're a very small village. We welcome hundreds of thousands of people every year.
When you come to this town, you'll find visitors wearing the logos of their favorite teams. There's something special about this destination, especially for those who've played the game of baseball. It's the road to Cooperstown. Traveling the countryside in Cooperstown, New York, I'm Andrew McCrae.
And we're just getting started on our tour of the American countryside. Still ahead, we check out some amazing wood clocks made by 2 farmers.
AgDay is brought to you by Farm Shop MFG. Did you know that 20% of stored corn is often overventilated by 3 points of moisture? On 100,000 bushels, that's a whole semi-load. Stop this problem for less with the End Zone for Corn by Farm Shop MFG. Specially priced at $2,100 per unit while supplies last.
He was a television newsman who was once famously described as the most trusted man in America. Many of you may have tuned in to Walter Cronkite's broadcast, but his personal story is a journey and one that we find while traveling the American countryside.
Oh yeah, so then where was the Kennedy?
Dom DeBrinket is a professor of history at Missouri Western State University. One of his favorite stories of the past is a broadcaster with roots right here in this town.
Walter Cronkite is St. Joseph, Missouri's most favorite son. He was born here. He spent his first 6 months here.
While 6 months as a baby may not sound significant, St. Joe was always important in Cronkite's life, as his grandparents lived in town, and one of his first radio broadcasting jobs was with the station just down the road in Kansas City. He was a war correspondent during World War II, and by 1950 had joined CBS television. He soon became one of the most respected journalists on screen. Many called him the most trusted man in America.
Cronkite had the advantage that journalists don't have today, which is 3 television networks as opposed to a 24-hour stream. He had 30 minutes to communicate to people.
Dom says Cronkite's fact-based reporting and Midwestern sensibility helped him gain the trust of television viewers. Over the decades, Cronkite delivered some of the world's most important news, both good and bad, to his audience.
Where President Kennedy lay after being taken from the Dallas street corner where he was shot, say that he is dead.
He was at the heart of America's most famous broadcast moments, whether it was Kennedy's assassination, the space race. He was there.
Perhaps it's not fair to compare today's television reporters to Cronkite. Times have changed, yet his work is still an example of great broadcasting.
Can you imagine calling any of our journalists today the most trusted man or woman in America? We deliberately select our news based on our political beliefs more often than we do on who's delivering it.
Cronkite delivered the news with his standard send-off each night.
And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6, 1981.
The Memorial and Museum here on campus has Cronkite's work desk, some of his Emmy Awards, and lots of video clips of his decades reporting the news. Dom says there's one highlight of most visitors' tours to the memorial.
The newsroom is our favorite part of the exhibit. It is a replication of the studio. We have all of our guests who come through, whether they're touring themselves or whether we're giving these tours. We always make sure they sit at the desk.
And while times have changed, it's certainly our goal to learn from Cronkite and share stories with integrity with the American public. And that's the way it was, traveling the countryside in St. Joseph, Missouri. I'm Andrew McCrae.
Farmers are pretty crafty, but what 2 farmers were able to create out of wood has stood the test of time. That story as we continue along the American countryside next.
Registration is open for the 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour, August 21st through the 24th. Attend one of our nightly meetings or join online as we gain insight on the 2023 growing season. Visit profarmercroptour.com/register to select the stop nearest you.
How did a couple of farmers go from growing crops to building amazingly detailed clocks? It's a story you can find in a museum in Iowa. We pick up the tour of the American countryside again with Andrew McCray.
Frank and Joseph Bealey helped their parents on the farm, but it soon became apparent that they had a pastime that would become their full-time preoccupation.
Frank was the carver and Joseph was the designer or engineer, I like to call him. And he actually drew everything up on paper.
And when Sharon Cleve says they were carving and designing, what they were creating were some of the most intricate and amazing wooden clocks you'll ever see.
The first clock that they made was in 1913, called the Creation Clock. And from there it started. And I'm not really sure, I mean, they were carving before that, but I'm not sure why they started making clocks. But once they did, it just seemed like nothing else was important anymore.
Most of these clocks are taller than a person and have hand-carved figures that move and music that plays.
Anywhere from 2 to 4 years it took to make one of these clocks. I mean, we call them clocks, but as you can see, they're a lot more than that.
There are over 20 of these very large clocks to see. The entire collection the Bealey brothers created.
The Apostles' clock is one of the favorites. Everybody who sees that really enjoys that. And the Village Blacksmith clock is another one that's everyone's favorite.
Perhaps it would have been an interesting story, just known to locals, if not for a prominent man who paid the Bealey brothers a visit in 1928.
I don't know how Henry Ford heard about these, but I'm sure that as wealthy as he was, I know he's probably sent his scouts out all over looking for things for his museum in Dearborn, Michigan. So he heard about these clocks, and he actually offered the Bealey brothers $1 million for the clock that's behind us here. And they turned him down.
That's the American Pioneer History Clock. The offer would be worth $17 million today. The pair turned him down, but the publicity soon had people from all over the nation coming to the farm to see the clocks. The Bealey brothers' sister, Anna, began charging 10 cents per head to see the collection. In 1947, the brothers sold the farm and moved to town when their parents passed away. Neither married, so they made arrangements for their priceless clocks to have a permanent home.
They actually willed them to the town of Spillville with the stipulation that they never be broken up in any way. The collection stayed together, nothing would ever be sold. So they stayed with the town.
These clocks mark the passing of time, yet the collection is truly timeless. Carvings of people and places that span centuries that still bring people here to rural Iowa to see the many clocks in this collection. Driving the countryside in Spillville, Iowa, I'm Andrew McCray.
Well, lots of people love to check out car museums along the American countryside. But one museum is geared toward the non-car lover. We check it out next. If you're a car collector, you know how fun it can be to go to car shows or car museums and check out some dream cars. But one car display isn't focused on attracting people who already love cars. Instead, they're looking to spark interest among non-car collectors. Andrew McCray explains.
As Chris Gergany explains, this car museum began a bit by accident.
Our main benefactors, Ward and Brenda Morgan, are very successful business people from the community here, and they went to a car auction to buy probably 2 toys. They love cars, they love things that go fast, they love the history of them, and inadvertently or accidentally bought 9 cars.
But where do you store 9 cars? The old Ray's Apple Market grocery store had closed. They bought it and took the cars there. But 9 cars inside a 55,000 square foot building looked a little sparse. They decided to purchase more cars and create a museum. The Midwest Dream Car Collection was born. There are about 65 cars on display at a time, with many more to rotate in and out. This place is a bit unique because they don't necessarily specialize in a brand or era.
We're all about the cars, but we're not necessarily as focused on the car people because they're already converted, they're already knowledgeable in our area. We want to show the non-car people why cars are so interesting and the impact they've had on history.
Certainly one of the most interesting is a car that can also be a boat.
Not a lot of people have heard of an amphicar. Amphicar is an amphibious car, meaning that it goes on both land and in the water.
Specifically, Doug is describing the Amphicar 770, which means it will go about 7 miles per hour in the water and 70 on the land. He remembers the first time they took it for a swim.
Yeah, it's a fascinating experience the first time you drive a car in a lake. One, it's fun to watch the people on the dock. See if someone pull up in a car and drive in the lake, they're all freaking out.
You can find a lot of interesting cars here, from those well over a century old to sports cars just a few years old, trucks, racing cars. Some may be worth over $1 million. If a car isn't roped off or on a platform, and if the crowds aren't too large, Chris might even let you sit in one and get your picture. As a child of the 80s, of course, my pick was the DeLorean of Back to the Future movie fame. In reality, the DeLorean was underpowered for its looks.
What happens when you hit 88? I'm telling you now, I've had it out on the highway, slight downhill, slight tailwind, fifth gear, floored to the maximum. I got up to 86. It will never hit 88.
Enough road to get up to 88. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
This museum hopes people will get up close and personal with cars, truly developing a passion for the industry. And who knows, you may just find one that will take you back to the future of automobiles. Driving the countryside in Manhattan, Kansas, I'm Andrew McCrae.
You can probably recite lines and sing songs from the movie, but how much do you know about the history of The Wizard of Oz? We head down the yellow brick road as our tour of the American countryside continues next.
Registration is open for the 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour, August 21st through the 24th. Attend one of our nightly meetings or join online as we gain insight on the 2023 growing season. Visit profarmercroptour.com/register to select the stop nearest you.
Click your heels together 3 times and say, "There's no place like home." That's one of the most famous lines from The Wizard of Oz. And it's still known today as the movie and story captivates audiences of all ages. But what's the story behind the tale? We wrap up our tour of the American countryside in Kansas.
In 1900, Frank Baum published a book that would go on to become the most watched movie in history. People are still retracing the steps of those characters as they walk up the steps with Dorothy at Anniam's house.
Follow the yellow brick road.
By all accounts, Frank Baum was not your ordinary father for his day.
He was an odd father for the 1800s. I think he was an odd person in general, but specifically, he was the one that was really engaged with the children at home. He sat down and told them bedtime stories every night.
As Caitlin Stubeman explains, Frank's storytelling not only captivated his children, but someone else in the family.
These bedtime stories just were so wonderful that his mother-in-law told him he was a fool if he didn't, write it down.
And that book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, was quite a hit. So much so that Frank Baum wrote 15 books by the time of his death in 1919. It's part of the story told here at the Oz Museum in Wamego, Kansas. But perhaps Baum's creativity would have remained just a series of books well known a century ago, if not for a movie that hit the screens 20 years later.
Gone with the Wind was actually competing with it at the exact same time. And The Wizard of Oz itself went way over budget, about $1 million over budget.
A huge sum in that day, but the characters from the book, the Tin Man, Scarecrow, Lion, and of course Dorothy and the Wicked Witch, had now come to life on the big screen. But what truly began to help the story build fame was something that began in 1956.
So it wasn't until the movie came on television one time a year that it truly gained momentum again.
It would be decades before movies could be rented and watched at home. The fact that The Wizard of Oz was on television around major holidays every year for many years made it something generations grew up with and something people of all ages enjoy connecting with yet today.
We have 2,000 pieces on display. But it is out of 30,000 pieces plus in the collection.
Some may ask, though, why is Wamego the place to tell the story of Dorothy and her cast of characters?
Nowhere in the book or the movie did they say what town Dorothy was from, but we are in Kansas, and our area definitely fits the vibe.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
And the movie The characters, the story, live on today, something people from across the nation and around the world come to experience in this small town. Traveling the countryside in Wamego, Kansas, I'm Andrew McCrae.
All right, thanks, Andrew, and we look forward to seeing more of your reports from the American countryside. And that's going to do us for this edition of Ag Day. From all of us here, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out in the farm country.